She was crying in his hallway at 11:40 at night, mascara running down her face, still wearing a dress she'd picked out for someone who spent the whole evening talking about someone else. She didn't ring the bell. She knocked. Soft. Like she wasn't sure she deserved to be heard. And when Ethan Carter opened that door, a man who hadn't let anyone close in 3 years, something shifted in him that he didn't have a name for yet. He let her in. Just for the night, he told himself. That was the first lie he'd ever told himself and almost believed. Drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. And if it hits home, subscribe. Every part is worth staying for. The wrench slipped at 11:38 p.m. Ethan Carter caught it before it hit the kitchen floor. Reflex, not luck. 3 years of working with his hands in tight spaces had made him fast. He set it down on the dish towel he'd laid across the counter and went back to the faucet he'd been fixing since 9 o'clock. Not because it was broken badly, because fixing things was what he did when the apartment got too quiet and his brain started going places he didn't want it to go. The faucet dripped. He tightened. It stopped. He stood at the sink and listened to the silence that followed. And it was the kind of silence that pressed against your chest from the inside. His daughter Sophie's drawings were still on the refrigerator. A sun with too many rays. A house with a lopsided chimney. A figure labeled Daddy in red crayon. She was 7, and she lived with her mother every other week, which meant this was one of those weeks where the apartment held her shape, but not her sound. Her cereal bowl was in the cabinet. Her purple backpack hook on the wall beside the door. Her half-finished coloring book on the coffee table. Present tense. But empty. Ethan dried his hands and checked his phone. No messages. He wasn't expecting any. He was pouring himself a glass of water when the knock came. Not a doorbell. The knock. 3 times. Slow. Cautious. Like whoever was on the other side of the door wasn't completely sure they should be there. He set the glass down. Nobody knocked on his door at 11:40 p.m. He wasn't that kind of neighbor. He nodded in the hallway. He held the elevator. He signed for packages when people weren't home. That was the full scope of his social life in building 4B of Crestwood Apartments. He looked through the peephole, and then he opened the door without thinking. Olivia Hart was standing in the hallway in a green dress that had probably looked perfect 6 hours ago. Her dark hair, which he'd only ever seen pulled back in a bun or a ponytail, had come mostly loose on one side. There was mascara under both eyes. Not a little, not tastefully smudged. Genuinely streaked down her cheeks in 2 thin black lines. She was holding her heels in one hand. Her feet were bare on the cold hallway floor. She looked at him like she hadn't completely planned what to say next. "Hey," she said. Her voice was steady, but just barely. "Hey," he said back. A second passed. She looked down at the heels in her hand, then back up at him, and he watched something in her face try to hold and then not quite make it. "I don't want to be alone tonight," she said. "Is that? I'm sorry. That's a strange thing to say. I know that's strange." "It's not strange," Ethan said, and he stepped back and opened the door wider. He didn't know Olivia Hart well. He knew her the way you know someone who lives directly across a hallway, which is to say, he knew her routines better than he knew her. She left every morning at 7:52. Always 7:52, not 7:50, not 8 o'clock. He knew because Sophie liked to watch from the window sometimes and had once announced, "The lady across the hall is very punctual, Daddy," which had made him laugh harder than he'd laughed in a while. He knew she worked in finance, accounting, something like that, because she sometimes came home with a laptop bag over each shoulder and the look of a person who had been staring at numbers for 10 hours straight. He knew she got Thai food delivered on Thursday evenings and grocery delivery on Sunday mornings. He knew her doormat said, "Home is where the Wi-Fi connects," which struck him as the kind of joke a person buys because it's inoffensive, not because it actually means anything to them. "Sit down," he said. "Do you want—" "I was going to make tea. Do you want tea?" "I don't want to put you out." "You're not putting me out. I was standing at my sink at midnight fixing a faucet that wasn't broken. You're honestly doing me a favor." Something in her face shifted. Not quite a smile, but close to one. She sat down on the edge of the couch. "Tea," she said. "Yeah, that would be good, thank you." He went to the kitchen and filled the kettle, and while the water heated, he stood at the counter and tried to figure out what exactly was happening. The woman from across the hall, the punctual, organized, Thai food on Thursdays woman, was sitting on his couch at 11:45 p.m. in a party dress and bare feet. He got out 2 mugs, chamomile. He didn't know why he had chamomile. It had been in the cabinet since before Sophie's mother left, which meant it had been there for 3 years, which was probably too long, but chamomile didn't really go bad, did it? He wasn't sure. He made it anyway. When he came back into the living room, she had taken the pins out of the loose side of her hair and was doing something with them, lining them up on the edge of his coffee table in a little row. He set her mug down in front of her, and she looked up. "Thank you," she said, "for letting me in. You didn't have to do that." "I know. Most people wouldn't have." "Most people aren't awake at midnight fixing things that aren't broken," he said, and sat down in the chair across from her. She wrapped both hands around the mug. He noticed her hands weren't quite steady. "Bad night?" he said. She laughed. One short sound, not particularly happy. "Bad doesn't cover it." "You want to tell me about it?" She looked at him across the coffee table. "You don't have to." "Olivia." He said her name for maybe the second time ever. "It's midnight. I've got tea and nowhere to be. Tell me." She'd been set up by a coworker. His name was Derek. He worked in commercial real estate, which she'd thought sounded promising, or at least stable. He'd looked fine in his photos. He'd texted coherently. She'd worn the green dress, which she hadn't worn since a work event 14 months ago, and she'd told herself this was going to be good. This was going to be the start of something good, because she was 31 years old and she was tired and she wanted something to be good. They met at a restaurant downtown. He was already there when she arrived, which she'd taken as a good sign. "Within 10 minutes, she said. He mentioned his ex-girlfriend. "Okay," Ethan said. "Her name is Jenna. She lives in Charlotte now. She's a yoga instructor. She apparently does this thing with her hands when she's passionate about something, and it's the most—" Olivia stopped, took a breath. "He said that, verbatim, at dinner, to me." He described the hand thing. And then he ordered us both another round of drinks, and then he described the hand thing again, but with different adjectives. Ethan said nothing. He picked up his tea. "And I sat there," Olivia said, "for an hour and a half. I sat there, and I smiled, and I asked appropriate follow-up questions, and I made appropriate sympathetic sounds, and I ate my sea bass, and I thought, okay, this is fine. This is just one evening. This is just one more bad evening." But it wasn't. She looked at him. When he walked me to my car, he said, "I need you to understand." He said this. He said, "You're a good listener, Olivia. I feel like I can really open up to you." She set down her mug. And then he said he'd had a really nice time and hoped we could do it again. The room was quiet. "He wanted to do it again," she said flatly. "Yeah," Ethan said. "I got that. He had a nice time because I was a good listener." She looked at her hands, still wrapped around the warm ceramic. "I drove home. I sat in the parking garage for 15 minutes, and then I walked upstairs and I knocked on your door because I didn't—" She stopped, started again. "I didn't want to go into my apartment and sit there by myself and think about how I've been doing this for 3 years. And I'm apparently very good at being someone's sounding board and very bad at being someone's—" She didn't finish the sentence. "Person," Ethan said quietly. She looked up at him. "You were going to say person," he said. Her jaw tightened. Not angry. Something else. "Yeah." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Can I say something without it sounding like something it's not?" "Sure." "That guy didn't deserve the green dress." She blinked. I'm serious, Ethan said. He was in there talking about Jenna's hands and you were sitting across from him in a dress you clearly saved for something that mattered. That's not a you problem. That's just a wrong room problem. You were in the wrong room with the wrong person. Olivia looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached up and pushed her hair out of her face, and for the first time since she'd walked in, some of the tension went out of her shoulders. Wrong room problem, she said. That's all it was. She picked up her tea again. You're surprisingly good at this. I fix things for a living. Sometimes that's pipes. Sometimes it's whatever this is. She almost smiled again. Is that your pitch? I don't have a pitch. I'm in sweatpants. That got her. A real one this time. A quiet laugh that she seemed almost surprised by, like it had slipped out without permission. It changed her whole face, made her look less like someone trying to hold a wall up and more like the person standing behind it. Yeah. They talked until 1:30 in the morning, not about anything designed to impress. That was what struck him later, turning it over in his mind after she'd gone. They didn't perform for each other. She asked him how long he'd been doing HVAC work. 11 years. Started straight out of high school, never planned on it becoming a career, but here he was. And he asked her how she ended up in accounting, and she said, I like when things balance, and the way she said it made him think she meant more than spreadsheets. He told her about Sophie. Cautiously, the way he always did. Not because he was ashamed, but because Sophie was the most important thing in his life, and he'd learned to be careful about who he let close to that. He told her Sophie was 7, that she had her mother's stubbornness and his tendency to fix things, that she had recently decided her life's goal was to be a marine biologist who also played professional basketball. That's very specific, Olivia said. She researches. She makes lists. She's 7 and she already has a 5-year plan. Olivia raised an eyebrow. A woman of systems. I respect that. She'd like you, he said. And then he wasn't sure why he'd said it, so he picked up his mug and looked at the middle distance. Olivia was quiet for a second. Where is she tonight? Her mom's, week on, week off. Do you get used to that, the alternating? No, he said honestly. You just get better at not showing it. She nodded slowly, like she understood something about that particular skill. He didn't ask about her family. Not that night. He sensed a door there that was locked from the inside, and he'd learned that you didn't rattle those locks. You waited to be let in. At 1:27, she looked at the clock on the microwave through the kitchen doorway and made a sound of genuine surprise. I should go, she said. I didn't realize. I've been here for almost 2 hours. It's fine. No, you have to. She started to stand. Do you work tomorrow? 7 a.m., but it's fine. Ethan. She said his name the way he'd said hers earlier. Direct. Like she was making sure he heard it. Thank you, genuinely. I don't normally... She paused, looking for the right words. I'm not usually someone who knocks on people's doors. I know. I'm not sure what made me... It doesn't matter, he said. I'm glad you did. She looked at him for a moment. Then she picked up her heels from the floor beside the couch and walked to the door, and he followed, and she turned around in the doorway. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Olivia. She crossed the hallway in bare feet. He watched her unlock her door. She glanced back once before she went in. Not a look he could read exactly, just a look. Just a, you're still there confirmation. And then the door closed, and he was standing in his own doorway, listening to the quiet click of her lock turning. He went back to the kitchen. The 2 mugs were still on the coffee table. He carried them to the sink and stood there washing them, both hands in warm water, looking out the dark window above the sink. She knocked, he thought. She stood in the hallway in a party dress at 11:40 at night and knocked on my door because she didn't want to be alone. He turned off the kitchen light. He thought about the way she'd lined those hairpins up on the edge of his coffee table. Neat little row. Even when she was falling apart, she was organizing something. He thought about, I like when things balance. He stood in the dark for a minute longer than he needed to. Then he went to bed and lay there staring at the ceiling and the apartment still felt empty, but different now. Not the kind of empty that presses inward. The kind that's waiting for something. He didn't know what to do with that. He fell asleep eventually, and he dreamed about nothing he could remember, and at 6:15 a.m., his alarm went off, and he got up and made coffee and went to work. And the next Thursday, he noticed her light was on across the hall when he got home at 7. And he stood at his own door with his keys in his hand for a full 10 seconds before he went inside. He told himself he didn't know why. That was the second lie. He had let her in because it was the human thing to do. He kept thinking about her because something in him recognized something in her. And that recognition, was the thing that was going to change everything. He just didn't know it yet. Thursday came around the way Thursdays always did. Quiet, unremarkable. The kind of day that didn't announce itself. Ethan got home at 6:58 p.m., boots still dusty from a crawlspace job in Riverside, and he was halfway through unlocking his door when he heard it. Music. Low, muffled through the wall across the hallway. Not loud enough to complain about. Just loud enough to notice. He noticed. He went inside. He didn't knock on her door. He had no reason to knock on her door. What had happened Tuesday night was a one-time thing. A woman had a bad evening, a neighbor opened his door, 2 people drank tea until 1:30 in the morning, and that was the whole story. There was no chapter 2. He wasn't writing chapter 2. He made himself a sandwich and ate it standing at the counter, and the music across the hall played on low, and he thought about nothing in particular. At 7:22, his phone buzzed. "Marcus, you working Saturday?" He texted back. "Morning. Free by noon." "Good. Bring your head. We need to talk about something." Ethan set the phone down. Marcus Hale had been his best friend since they were 19, working the same summer crew, laying ductwork in a half-built office park outside Columbus. He was the kind of man who said we need to talk and meant it, who didn't use words to fill space, who had been divorced once and come out the other side of it with a quality Ethan privately thought of as earned wisdom. The kind you only get from being genuinely wrong about something that mattered. He didn't reply to the last text. He finished his sandwich. He went to bed earlier than usual. He did not think about Olivia Hart. He thought about Olivia Hart exactly 3 times before he fell asleep. The first time was when he turned off the light and heard the faint sound of her television through the shared wall. She'd switched from music to something else, some late-night program with a studio audience. The second time was when he was almost under and suddenly remembered the way she'd lined up those hairpins on his coffee table. The third time was somewhere between awake and not, when he thought he heard her laugh, real, unguarded, probably at whatever was on television. And the sound of it moved through the wall and settled somewhere in the room, and he didn't try to analyze it. He was too tired. He just let it be there. The knock came on Sunday. Not late this time. 4:17 in the afternoon, Sophie's side of the week, which meant the apartment smelled like macaroni and cheese and finger paint, and Sophie's sneakers were in the middle of the floor because she'd taken them off in the exact wrong place and hadn't been persuaded to move them yet. Ethan opened the door, and Olivia was standing there with a ceramic dish covered in foil. "I made too much casserole," she said. He looked at her. She was in jeans and a plain shirt, hair up, glasses on. He'd never seen her in glasses before, frameless rectangles that made her look simultaneously more serious and more human. She held the casserole dish out toward him like a peace offering, or maybe like evidence. "You made casserole," he said. "I make it when I'm stress cooking. I do that sometimes. It makes a lot." "What are you stressed about?" She opened her mouth, closed it. "Do you want the casserole or not?" "I want the casserole," he said, and stepped back. She came in, same as before, but different. Easier this time. Less like someone stealing herself, and more like someone who'd decided something. She set the dish on the counter. Sophie appeared from the hallway, paint-stained and curious. "Hi," Sophie said to Olivia, with the directness of a child who hasn't yet learned to be diplomatic about her interest in people. "Hi," Olivia said. "You must be Sophie." Sophie looked at her father with an expression that was approximately, You told her about me? And then back at Olivia with an expression that was approximately interesting. What's in the dish? She said. Chicken casserole. Is it spicy? No spicy. Okay, Sophie said, as though she'd completed a full due diligence process. You can stay for dinner if you want. Ethan looked at his daughter, 7 years old and already running his household. Olivia looked at him, checking. He lifted one shoulder. Up to you. I don't want to intrude, Olivia said. You brought the food, Sophie said, with the unassailable logic of a child. So technically you're invited. Olivia stayed for dinner. It wasn't planned, and it wasn't complicated, and it was, Ethan thought later, one of the better Sunday evenings he'd had in a long time. Sophie talked almost constantly about marine biology, about her best friend Priya, who had a hamster named Governor, about a book she was reading in school that she described as very intense for 2nd grade. Olivia listened the same way she'd listened to Ethan on Tuesday night, fully, without performing interest, asking questions that proved she'd been paying attention. At one point, Sophie said, Do you have a spreadsheet for your life? Olivia paused. What makes you ask that? Daddy says some people have spreadsheets for everything. He says it like it's a bad thing, but I think it sounds organized. It's very organized, Olivia said, and she looked across the table at Ethan with something sharp and amused in her eyes. And yes, I do have spreadsheets. For what? Lots of things. Like what kinds of things? Olivia glanced at Ethan again, and this time there was something else in it. Something almost like an invitation to a joke, only the two of them had the context for. He pressed his mouth together to keep a straight face. Important things, Olivia said. Boring grown-up things. Sophie accepted this and moved on to describing Governor the hamster in significant detail, and Ethan looked down at his plate and smiled at nothing. After Sophie was in bed, Olivia helped him clear the table without being asked. They did it without talking, moving around each other in the kitchen in that particular way that requires a certain level of mutual comfort. The reaching past, the knowing which cabinet things go back in, the understanding of where to stand so you're not in the way. At the sink, she said, She's wonderful. I know, he said. She didn't get it from me. I don't believe that. She got the stubbornness from me. The rest is all her. Olivia handed him the dish to dry. She asked me if I had a spreadsheet for my life, and I think that's the most insightful thing anyone said to me in months. She's 7. Smart is smart. He set the dish in the cabinet. What would it say? The life spreadsheet. Olivia was quiet for a moment. Her hands were in the soapy water. Column A, what I planned. Column B, what happened. She paused. Very small column B. He looked at her sideways. That's not nothing. That's actually a lot. It mostly looks like gaps. Gaps are where things happen, he said. In HVAC, the spaces in the wall are where all the actual systems live. The visible stuff is just surface. She turned her head to look at him. Did you just compare emotional vulnerability to ductwork? I contain multitudes. She laughed. That real one, the unguarded one. And the kitchen felt smaller and warmer, and he dried the last dish and put it away, and neither of them moved toward the door. She left at 9:30 with the empty casserole dish under her arm. He watched her cross the hallway. She didn't look back this time, just let herself in. But right before the door closed, she said through the gap, "Thank you for letting Sophie invite me." "Thanks, Sophie," he said. A pause. Then, "I will." And she closed the door. He stood in his own doorway for a moment. Then Marcus's voice came into his head, clear as anything. "You're going to fall, you know. It's already starting." He went inside and didn't think about that. He thought about it twice before he went to sleep. The Saturday morning with Marcus happened at a diner off Route 9 that smelled like coffee and bacon grease, in the particular combination that makes you feel like the world is basically manageable. Marcus was already in the booth when Ethan arrived. He was a big man, broad-shouldered, the kind of face that had settled into a permanent expression of considering whether to say something. He had a coffee in front of him and was looking at his phone, and when Ethan slid in across from him, he put the phone down. "Talk," Marcus said. Good morning to you too. I know your good mornings. This isn't one of them. Something's happening with you. Nothing's happening with me. Marcus looked at him. He had a talent for silence. Not uncomfortable silence. Just the kind that made clear he wasn't going anywhere. And you might as well. Ethan picked up the menu. My neighbor came over Tuesday night. Marcus didn't react, just waited. She had a bad date. She knocked on my door. We talked for a while. She left. Uh-huh. And then she came back Sunday with a casserole. A casserole. She made too much. Sure she did. Marcus picked up his coffee. And nothing. She stayed for dinner because Sophie invited her. She helped with the dishes. She left. And you've been thinking about it ever since. Ethan set down the menu. Marcus, I'm asking. I've been... He stopped. It's not like that. I didn't say what it was like. I asked if you've been thinking about it. The waitress came, and they ordered without looking at anything. And when she left, Marcus leaned back in the booth and just looked at him with that face. She's my neighbor, Ethan said. I'm aware that neighbors exist. She came over because she was upset. I was there. That's the whole thing. She came back Sunday. With food. People don't cook food for people they don't think about, Marcus said. That's a law of physics. It's not a law of physics. It should be. He set down his cup. When's the last time you let someone in? I mean actually let someone in. Not service industry polite. Not hold the elevator in. Ethan said nothing. 3 years, Marcus said. Not unkindly, just accurate. You've been running on low power mode for 3 years, E. You fix everyone's systems but your own. That woman knocked on your door at midnight in a party dress and you made her tea. That's not nothing. That's you. That's just being a decent human being. Sure, and the fact that you're sitting here 3 days later still thinking about it. What's that? The food came. They ate for a minute without talking. Then Ethan said, I don't know what to do with it. With what? With any of it. With the way she looked when she laughed at dinner. With the fact that I haven't heard someone laugh in my kitchen in 3 years, and I didn't realize how much I missed it until... He stopped himself. Marcus looked at him steadily. Until she did it. Yeah? Okay, Marcus said. Now we're talking. I'm not looking for this. I'm not in a position for this. I have Sophie every other week, and a lease that's up in 8 months and a business I'm trying to grow from the ground up. I don't have space for what? For another person? For complication. Marcus put his fork down. Let me tell you something I know from experience, and you're going to hate it because it sounds like a greeting card, but it's true. The people who show up at your door when they're broken are not an interruption. They're the assignment. He held up a hand before Ethan could speak. I'm not saying marry the woman. I'm saying stop talking yourself out of whatever this is before it's even had a chance to be something. You have a habit of that. You know you do. Ethan looked out the window. She didn't go to a friend, Marcus said, quieter now. She didn't call someone. She crossed a hallway and knocked on your door at 11:40 at night. That's specific. That means something. Or she was just desperate and I was closest. Maybe. Marcus picked his fork back up. But you didn't close the door either. The diner around them was loud with Saturday morning noise. Families, couples, a group of older men, 2 booths down, arguing about baseball. And Ethan sat in the middle of it and felt, with a clarity that surprised him, that Marcus was right. Not about what it meant. About what he was doing with it. Which was the same thing he always did. Filing it under not the right time before it even got a hearing. I don't want to be wrong about this, Ethan said. You already care about getting it right, Marcus said. Which means you're already somewhere. The question is whether you're gonna stand there forever or take a step. Ethan drove home without the radio on. He pulled into the parking garage and sat in the car for 2 minutes. Just thinking. He thought about the hairpins on the coffee table. He thought about Sophie saying she can stay for dinner if she wants, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. He thought about, I like when things balance, and how it had sounded like something said about more than numbers, and how he'd heard it, and kept it without meaning to, without even deciding to. The way you keep a song you didn't realize you'd memorized until it's already there. He went upstairs. Her door was closed. Her light was off. He could see the gap under it, dark, which meant she was out or in bed, and it was 1:15 in the afternoon, so she was probably out. He stood in the hallway with his keys in his hand and thought about nothing actionable. Then he went inside his own apartment and stood in the kitchen and looked at the cabinet where he'd put the dish from the casserole. She'd taken it back with her. The cabinet was the same as always. His phone buzzed. Sophie, from her mom's, sending a voice memo. He played it. Daddy. The lady from across the hall, the one with the casserole and the spreadsheets. Do you think she'd want to be my friend? Priya has 2 friends who are adults, and she says it's very useful. Let me know. He played it twice. Then he sat down on the couch and pressed his hands together and stared at the middle of the room, and the thing Marcus had said came back to him clean and quiet and impossible to argue with. You're already somewhere. The question is whether you're going to stand there forever or take a step. He stayed on the couch for a long time. The answer was somewhere in the room with him, patient, waiting for him to stop being afraid of it. He wasn't ready to name it yet. But for the first time in 3 years, the apartment was quiet in a way that felt like before instead of after. And that was different. That was something. She came back on Wednesday. Not with food this time. No casserole, no borrowed excuse. Just Olivia, standing at his door at 8:44 p.m. in her work clothes, blazer still on, laptop bag over one shoulder, looking like someone who had been arguing with herself the entire drive home and had lost. I know it's late, she said. It's not late. I won't stay long. You don't have to qualify it, Ethan said. Come in. She came in. She sat on the couch in the same spot as before, and he noticed she'd stopped looking around the apartment when she entered. She just moved to that spot the way people move toward something they've already decided is theirs. He noticed that. He filed it away without deciding what to do with it. Bad day? He said from the kitchen. Medium day with a bad ending. What happened at the end? She set her laptop bag down on the floor. My boss pulled me into a meeting at 4:30 to tell me that the Henderson account, which I have been managing for 2 years, which I rebuilt from a near-audit situation, which is now one of our most stable portfolios, is being reassigned to a colleague because, quote, he has more bandwidth right now. Ethan came out of the kitchen with 2 glasses of water. Bandwidth. Bandwidth. As though 2 years of my work is just a matter of scheduling. She took the glass he offered without looking up. And I sat in that meeting, and I nodded, and I said, I understand completely. And I walked back to my desk, and I finished my remaining work, and I drove home, and I sat in my car in the parking garage for 11 minutes. He sat down across from her. Same spot as last time? She looked up. What? The parking garage. Same spot where you sat after the date? Something moved across her face. Surprise. Then something quieter. Yeah, she said. Same spot. Okay. What does that mean? Okay? It means you have a spot, he said. That's not a bad thing. People need spots. She looked at him for a moment like she was deciding whether to say something. Then she said, You're very strange, Ethan Carter. I've been told. It's not an insult. I know. She drank her water. He drank his. The apartment was quiet around them in the particular way it got quiet when Sophie wasn't there. Heavier, more still, like the rooms were aware of their own extra space. She asked about you, he said. Olivia looked up. Sophie? She sent me a voice memo. She wants to know if you'd consider being her friend. He paused. She specified that it would be useful. Olivia stared at him. Then she pressed her mouth together in that way she did right before she laughed. He'd learned to recognize it already, which was a fact he didn't examine too closely. She's 7, and she uses the word useful. She's been using it since she was 5. I don't know where she got it. What did you tell her? I told her I'd pass along the inquiry. Olivia set her glass down on the coffee table, precisely in the same ring mark it had left before. Tell her yes, she said. Tell her I accept the terms. He smiled at that. Couldn't help it. She saw it, and something in her eyes shifted. Not dramatically, just a small internal adjustment, like a dial being turned 1 degree. She looked away first. I'm going to be here a lot, she said to the middle of the room. I can feel it. I'm going to keep ending up at your door. That's fine. Is it? She looked back at him. Because I know what I'm like. I know my patterns. I compartmentalize very well Monday through Friday, and then on Wednesday night, something breaks through, and I come over here and you just let me. And I don't want to take advantage of that. You're not taking advantage. I might be, without meaning to. She folded her hands in her lap. You're easy to be with, Ethan. That's rare. I don't know if you know that about yourself, but it's true. And I think I might be leaning on that in a way that isn't fair to you. The room was very quiet. He looked at her for a long moment. Really looked, the way he hadn't let himself look before. The tiredness under her eyes that her competence usually covered up. The way she held herself straight, even when she was exhausted. The fact that she was sitting in his apartment warning him about herself, instead of just taking what was easy, which told him something significant about who she actually was underneath the blazer and the spreadsheets. Here's what I think, he said. I think you're used to people treating your presence as a thing they have to earn, or a thing you owe them, and nobody's ever just... He stopped. Tried again. Nobody's ever just left the door open. She didn't answer right away. I'm leaving the door open, he said. That's my choice. You don't have to manage that for me. She looked at him like he'd said something in a language she recognized but hadn't spoken in a long time. Okay, she said, very quietly. Okay, he said back. They sat in the quiet for a moment, and it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of quiet that settles after something true gets said. Then she reached into her laptop bag and pulled out her computer. Can I work for a little while? I have 40 minutes of things I need to finish. Go ahead. She worked. He read, a manual for a new compressor system, which was admittedly not riveting, but necessary. And the apartment held both of them without any particular fuss about it. And at 10:15 she closed the laptop and said she was going to head home, and he walked her to the door, and she said goodnight and crossed the hall, and that was Wednesday. Thursday she texted him. First time she'd ever texted him. It was a screenshot of a marine biology YouTube video about bioluminescent creatures in the deep ocean with the message, "For Sophie." In case she hasn't seen this one. The anglerfish part is particularly intense. He showed Sophie on FaceTime that night. Sophie watched the anglerfish part with enormous eyes and immediately said, "Tell her thank you, and that I have 11 questions." He relayed this. Olivia replied with a single laughing emoji, and then, 30 seconds later, "Tell her I'm ready when she is." He looked at that text for longer than a text warranted looking at. The following Tuesday, Marcus called. "How's the neighbor situation?" Marcus said. "There is no situation." "She been over again?" Ethan was quiet. "Right," Marcus said. "So what's the holdup?" "I'm not holding up anything. He searched for the word. "We're becoming friends." "Uh-huh." "That's a real thing that can happen between two people." "It's a real thing that happens," Marcus agreed, "right before one of them gets blindsided by their own feelings and does something they weren't planning on." A pause. "Which one of you is it going to be?" "Neither. Nobody's getting blindsided." "You sure? Because from the outside, and I say this with love, it looks like you're already 20 feet down a road and you keep telling yourself you haven't moved." Ethan didn't say anything to that. "Just be honest with yourself," Marcus said. "That's all I'm asking. Not with her, not yet. Just with yourself. Because I know you, E. When you care about something, you start protecting it before you've even admitted you have it. And that's not caution. That's just fear with better posture." The call ended. Ethan sat with that phrase for a long time. Fear with better posture. He was still sitting with it 2 days later when everything shifted. It was a Saturday morning, Sophie's weekend, and they were making pancakes. A process that in their household involved significantly more batter on the counter than on the griddle. When there was a knock at the door, Sophie went for it before Ethan could say anything, because Sophie treated his apartment as jointly managed, and opened the door to find Olivia holding a carton of orange juice, and looking mildly startled to find herself at eye level with a 7-year-old. "Hi," Sophie said. "We're making pancakes. Do you want some?" "I actually just came to return." Olivia held up the juice. "You lent me this last week and I replaced it." "We didn't lend you orange juice," Sophie said. "Your dad did. He didn't tell me." Sophie stepped back. "Come in, there's enough batter. Daddy always makes too much." "I make exactly enough," Ethan called from the kitchen. "You make too much," Sophie said, to Olivia, with the air of someone correcting the public record. Olivia came in. She handed Ethan the juice. He had actually forgotten he'd lent it to her 2 weeks ago, when she'd been making something and run out. And he saw her take in the situation. Batter bowl, flour on the counter, Sophie already back on her stool overseeing operations. "Stay," he said. Not a question, not quite an invitation, just a word. She looked at him. "I don't want to—" "Olivia." She closed her mouth. "Okay." She stayed for pancakes. She and Sophie talked about the anglerfish video for 22 minutes. Ethan timed it loosely because it was remarkable, and Sophie asked her 7 questions, which was 4 fewer than threatened, but still covered significant ground, including whether Olivia thought anglerfish felt lonely, what it was like to work with numbers all day, and whether she thought Governor the hamster had an inner life. Olivia answered every single one without talking down to her. "She has an inner life," Olivia said, about the hamster. "I think all creatures with nervous systems have some version of an interior experience. The science on that has been evolving." Sophie stared at her. "That's what I told Priya. Priya said hamsters are just reacting. I said reacting is a kind of thinking." "Reacting is a kind of thinking," Olivia confirmed. Sophie looked at her father with an expression that clearly meant this one, and Ethan turned back to the stove before his face did something he wasn't ready for. After Sophie went to play in her room, the kitchen was suddenly just the two of them and the sound of the griddle cooling down. "She's going to cite you in arguments for years," Ethan said, stacking the last plates. "Good. I stand by the hamster position. She's going to tell Priya her adult friend said so." Olivia paused. Her adult friend. Her words. She was quiet for a moment. Something working through her. He could see it. The way she went briefly somewhere internal and then came back. "I like that," she said, simply. "She means it." "I know." Olivia looked down at the counter she'd been wiping, even though it was already clean. "Ethan, can I ask you something and have you answer me honestly?" "Yeah. Is this—" She stopped, reorganized. "Do you ever feel like I come over and I take up space and then I leave, and you're just supposed to go back to whatever you were doing?" He turned to face her fully. "No. Because I think about it sometimes. After I go home, I think, what does that look like from the outside? Someone who keeps showing up. It looks like someone who decided she didn't want to be alone in a particular way," he said, "and who keeps being right about where to go instead." She looked up at him. "That's not a burden," he said. "Not to me." She held his gaze for a moment. Then, "You said that like you mean it." "I do mean it." Another moment. The kind that had weight. The kind where something could have shifted if either of them had moved an inch in any direction. Sophie's voice from down the hall. "Daddy, can Olivia see my drawings?" The moment held for one more second and then resolved itself peacefully, like a chord that doesn't fully land but doesn't need to. "Come see the drawings," Ethan said. Olivia followed him down the hall. Sophie had laid 6 drawings out on her bed, with the seriousness of a curator preparing a gallery showing. She walked Olivia through each one: the marine animals, The basketball court. A portrait of Ethan that she described as realistic, but with artistic license which he thought was generous. And Olivia crouched down to look at each one at eye level and asked questions, and Sophie glowed the way children glow when an adult actually sees what they've made. Ethan leaned in the doorway and watched and didn't say anything. He was aware, in a way he hadn't let himself be before, of how natural this was. How it didn't feel like an imposition or a performance. How Olivia wasn't trying to make Sophie like her. She just genuinely found her interesting, which Sophie, with her infallible 7-year-old radar, clearly felt. He was aware that Marcus was right. He was already 20 feet down this road. Olivia left at noon. Sophie hugged her, unsolicited, decisive, the hug of a child who has made up her mind, and Olivia looked startled for exactly 1 second and then hugged her back with both arms. At the door she said quietly, so Sophie wouldn't hear, "She's really something." "Yeah," Ethan said. "You did that." "She mostly did herself." "You gave her the room to." Olivia looked at him steadily. "Not everyone knows how to do that." She left. He closed the door. Sophie appeared immediately at his elbow. "I like her," she announced. "I know you do." "Do you like her?" "She's a good neighbor." "Daddy." Sophie's voice carried the particular exhaustion of someone dealing with an adult who is being deliberately obtuse. "That's not what I asked." He looked down at his daughter. 7 years old, sees everything. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I like her." Sophie nodded, as if this confirmed what she had long suspected, and went back to her room. Ethan stood in the hallway of his own apartment, completely outmaneuvered by a second grader, and thought about what Marcus had said. Fear with better posture. He could feel it, the exact outline of the thing he'd been refusing to name. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, just present, the way a sound is present when you stop making noise long enough to hear it. He liked Olivia Hart, not in the way you like a neighbor. Not in the way you like someone you feel sorry for. In the specific, particular way that you like one specific, particular person when they've started to fit into the shape of your life in a way that you didn't plan and can't quite explain and wouldn't trade. He knew it, and what he did with it, that was the question. That was what kept him in the hallway another minute after Sophie had gone back to her room, because knowing something and acting on it were separated by a distance that looked small from a distance and was anything but when you were standing at the edge of it. He had been wrong before, he had been certain before, and certain hadn't protected him from anything. So he stood there, and he knew, and he didn't move. Not yet. But the knowing was real. And real things, Marcus had once told him, don't wait around forever. That evening, after Sophie was in bed, his phone lit up on the counter. "Olivia, thank you for this morning. The pancakes, the hamster debate, all of it." He typed back, "Sophie is going to be insufferable to Priya now." Good. The hamster deserves an advocate. He smiled at the phone, then he typed, "You're good with her." A pause, longer than usual. Then, "She makes it easy." Another pause, then a second message, "So do you." He looked at that for a long time. He didn't reply right away. Not because he didn't know what to say, but because whatever he said next felt like it mattered in a way that required more than a text, and he wasn't ready to have that conversation. Not tonight. Not with the knowing still new and the fear still doing its thing with its borrowed posture. He set the phone down. He looked across the room at nothing, and somewhere across that hallway, behind a closed door, he knew she was looking at her phone too. Waiting. Not for an answer exactly. For something she didn't have a column for yet. He picked the phone back up. Typed, "Get some sleep, Olivia." She replied 3 minutes later. "You too, Ethan." And that was all. But it was the kind of all that meant something. The kind that sits on a night table and hums quietly to itself long after the light goes out. 3 weeks. That was how long it had been since the knock at 11:40 p.m., and in 3 weeks the shape of Ethan's life had changed in ways he hadn't cataloged yet, because cataloging them felt like admitting something he wasn't ready to admit in full daylight. Olivia came over 4 more times, sometimes with a reason. She needed to borrow something. She had leftover food. She had a question about the heating unit in her apartment that she could have called the super about but didn't. Sometimes without one. She would knock and he would open the door and she would say something like, "I have wine and nowhere to be," or simply, "Is this okay?" And he would say yes and mean it completely, and she would come in and they would talk for 2 hours about nothing that looked important from the outside and everything that was. He learned things. Not from asking, from paying attention, which was different. He learned she took her coffee black in the morning and sweet at night, which he thought was telling about how she moved through a day. He learned she had a younger sister in Portland she talked to every Sunday, and the calls always ran long, and she always looked lighter afterward, which meant the sister was someone she actually let in rather than managed. He learned she had a habit of straightening things when she was nervous. Coasters, the edge of a book on the coffee table, the position of her own phone. Small invisible adjustments that she probably didn't know she was making. He learned that she laughed with her whole face when something genuinely surprised her, and that this was different from the polite laugh she deployed when something was mildly amusing, and that he had started calibrating for which one he was going to get, and that getting the real one felt like a small specific victory every time. He did not do anything with any of this information. He just held it. The way you hold something you're not sure is yours to hold. Marcus called on a Thursday and didn't bother with preamble. "You told her yet?" "Told her what?" "Don't." Ethan was quiet. We're not doing this again where you wait so long the moment passes and then you spend 8 months being fine about it. I've seen you be fine about things. It's painful to watch." "I don't know what I'd even say." "The truth usually works. The truth is complicated. The truth is never as complicated as the story we build around it to avoid saying it," Marcus said. "You like her. She keeps coming back. That's not complicated. That's 2 people who should have a conversation. What if I'm her safe place and that's the whole thing? What if she needs somewhere to land and I happen to be across the hall? And when she doesn't need that anymore, I'm just the neighbor again?" A pause on the line. Then Marcus said, more quietly, "Is that actually what you think? Or is that what you're telling yourself so you don't have to risk finding out?" Ethan didn't answer. "Yeah," Marcus said. "That's what I thought." After the call, Ethan stood in his kitchen for a long time doing nothing productive. He thought about what Marcus had said, and under that, he thought about what he actually believed. And under that was a quiet, honest thing he'd been keeping at arm's length for 2 weeks. He didn't think he was just her safe place. He thought, carefully, with all the caution of a man who had been wrong before, that it was more than that, on both sides. He thought she felt it too. He just didn't know what to do about it without wrecking what they already had. That was the real fear. Not that he was wrong. That he was right, and that saying it out loud would make it strange and careful and loaded, when right now it was the most natural thing in his life. The knock came that Friday at 7:30 p.m., different from the others. Faster, 3 quick raps. He opened the door. Olivia was in her coat, still on, bag over her shoulder. She'd come straight up from the parking garage. Her jaw was set in the particular way he'd learned to recognize as controlled upset, which meant something had happened that she hadn't processed yet. "I need 5 minutes," she said. "I just need 5 minutes and then I'll go." "Come in." She came in. She didn't sit. She paced, 3 steps in one direction, 3 back, and he stood near the kitchen and watched and waited, because he'd learned that she needed the motion before she needed the words. "My coworker Ryan," she said. "The one who got the Henderson account." "Yeah. He presented it today, to the full team, with my framework, my formulas, the entire restructuring model I built over 14 months. He presented it as his own work, and no one said anything, and I sat in that conference room, and I smiled, and I nodded, because what else do you do? What else is there to do? And then I came home, and I sat in my car, and I thought—" She stopped pacing. "I thought, I'm 31 years old, and I'm very good at my job, and I keep ending up in rooms where that doesn't matter because I'm better at being useful than I am at being seen. The word landed. Seen. He heard what was underneath it. "Olivia," he said. I know I need to do something about it. Document things better, talk to HR. I know the practical steps. I have a list. I always have a list." She looked at him. "I just needed to say it out loud to someone who wasn't going to immediately solve it for me." He held up both hands. "Not solving." "Thank you. Do you want to sit down, or do you need to keep pacing?" She considered this seriously. "Pacing. 2 more minutes." "Take your time." She paced. He waited. He poured her a glass of water because it was a thing he could do that wasn't solving, and set it on the counter where she'd see it. She stopped pacing at the 2-minute mark almost exactly, which somehow didn't surprise him, and picked up the water and drank half of it and looked at him. "You knew I needed 2 more minutes," she said. "I guessed." "How? You pace fast when you're still processing and slow when you're coming down. You were slowing down." She stared at him. "You watch me pace." "I pay attention," he said simply. Something moved through her face that he couldn't fully read. She set the glass down. "That's—" She stopped, started again. "No one's ever said that to me before. Not like that." "Paying attention?" "Like it's just what you do. Like it's obvious." She looked at the glass. "Most people are watching themselves think about me. You're actually watching me." He didn't know what to say to that, so he didn't say anything, which turned out to be right. She sat down. He sat across from her. The apartment was quiet in the particular Friday evening way it was quiet when Sophie was at her mom's, and outside the window the city was making its usual Friday sounds. Distant traffic, someone's music from the floor above. And in the middle of all of it, the two of them sat, and Ethan felt, with a steadiness he hadn't expected, that this was exactly where he was supposed to be. That thought scared him, but not enough to move away from it. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yeah." "When your marriage ended," she paused. "Is that okay to ask about?" "It's okay." "What did you—" She was choosing her words carefully. He could see it. "What did you learn? About yourself. Not about her. About you." He thought about it for a real minute. Not performing consideration. Actually thinking. "I learned that I'm better at maintaining things than building them. In relationships. I'm good at keeping things stable, solving problems, being consistent. But I waited too long to build something real with her because I thought stability was enough. And by the time I understood the difference, she'd already stopped waiting." Olivia was very still. "How do you know the difference between stability and something real?" "Real things scare you," he said. "Stable things just require maintenance. If you're not a little scared, you're probably just maintaining." She looked at him. "Are you scared right now?" The room didn't move. The clock on the microwave said 8:02. The city outside kept going about its business. "Yes," Ethan said. Her breath shifted, just slightly. "Me too," she said, very quietly. The moment held itself between them like something delicate, something that had been building for 3 weeks without either of them naming it, and he could feel the exact weight of it, the exact fragility, and he understood with perfect clarity that this was the moment Marcus had been talking about. The one where you either stepped toward or stepped back. The one you didn't get to pause and reconsider. He opened his mouth. His phone rang. It was Sophie's ringtone. The one she'd chosen herself, a bar from a cartoon theme song. And the moment broke clean and quiet, like a glass set down too hard. He looked at Olivia. She looked at him. Something in her face said, "It's okay. Go." With a warmth that somehow made everything more complicated, not less. He answered. "Hey, Bug." "Daddy." Sophie's voice, serious in the way she got when something was genuinely bothering her. "Can I tell you something?" "Always." "Priya's hamster died." He sat back. "Oh, I'm sorry, sweetheart. When?" "Today. During school. Her mom texted her at lunch and she cried in the bathroom and I didn't know what to say, and I think I said the wrong thing. What did you say? I said Governor probably isn't scared anymore because being alive is the scariest part. A pause. Was that wrong? Ethan looked across the room at Olivia, who was watching his face and had clearly understood enough from his end of the conversation to know this was something real. That wasn't wrong, he said. That was actually really good. She stopped crying. Then you said exactly the right thing. Okay. Sophie's voice was quieter now, the seriousness settling into something more like sadness. Daddy, do you think she's lonely? Governor, do you think she was lonely? He thought about the conversation with Olivia about inner lives and hamsters and nervous systems. I think she had good company while she was here, he said carefully. Priya loved her. That counts for a lot. A pause. Then, okay, I love you. I love you too, Bug. Sleep well. He hung up, looked at his phone for a second, then at Olivia. Priya's hamster died, he said. Olivia's face did something complicated. Governor? Governor. She pressed her hand briefly over her eyes, not crying, just feeling it. Oh, that poor kid. Sophie told her that being alive is the scariest part. Olivia lowered her hand, looked at him. She said that? Verbatim. She's 7. I know. That's... She shook her head slowly. Where does she get that? I have no idea. He set his phone face down on the armrest. But apparently, Priya stopped crying. Olivia looked at him across the coffee table, and something had shifted since before the phone call. Not damaged, not lost, but moved. The way furniture moves when you work around it and then step back and see it's in a different place than where you started. The charged quiet from before had resolved into something softer, more honest, less like a ledge and more like ground. She's going to be okay, Olivia said. Sophie, she's going to be more than okay. I hope so. I know so. She said it with a certainty that he felt land somewhere in his chest. She has someone who picks up the phone when she needs him. He didn't look away. She's the best thing I've done. Yeah, Olivia said. I can see that. She left at 9:45. He walked her to the door the way he always did, and she turned in the doorway the way she always did, and the moment from before was still somewhere between them, not gone, just resting. Ethan, she said. Yeah, the thing you said, about real things scaring you. She held his gaze steadily. I've been thinking about that since you said it. And I think... She paused, pressed her lips together, made a decision. I think I've been doing stability for a long time. I'm very good at it. My whole life is structured for it. She tilted her head slightly. And then I knocked on your door 3 weeks ago, and something changed, and I don't have a column for it. In the spreadsheet. I keep looking for the right column, and it isn't there. He stayed very still. What do you do when the data doesn't fit a column? She almost smiled. You create a new one. Have you? A beat. 2. I'm thinking about it, she said. And she crossed the hallway. And she closed her door. He stood in his doorway exactly the way he'd stood there 3 weeks ago, after she'd walked in for the first time. And the feeling in the apartment was the same specific one. Not empty, not full, but charged, like the air before weather. He went to bed and didn't sleep for an hour. He thought about what she'd said. About columns that don't exist yet. About building things versus maintaining them. About the moment that had almost been a moment before his phone rang, and whether it would come back around, or whether those things only came once. He thought about Marcus saying, real things don't wait around forever. Saturday morning, 7:52, he heard her door close across the hallway. Her regular time. Not 1 minute before or after. He stood at his kitchen window with his coffee and thought, She is the most consistent person I have ever watched be consistently something, and I cannot figure out whether I'm in love with that, or whether I'm in love with the cracks in it, or whether at this point the distinction matters. His phone buzzed on the counter. Olivia. I created the column, 3 words. He stared at them, then typed back. What did you name it? He watched the 3 dots appear, disappear, appear again. A full 40 seconds. Then, still working on that. He set the phone down and looked out the window and felt something shift in him. Not a door opening, not quite, but the sound of a lock turning. The slow, deliberate sound of something that has been closed for a long time, beginning, at last, to move. He didn't know what came next, but for the first time since Olivia Hart had stood in his hallway in a green dress and bare feet and whispered, "I don't want to be alone tonight," he understood with complete clarity that whatever came next was not going to be nothing. And that the fear he felt about that was exactly the right kind. The column stayed unnamed for 6 days. Ethan knew because he counted them without meaning to, the way you count things that matter when you're pretending they don't. 6 days of regular texts. About Sophie's latest marine biology findings. About a podcast Olivia thought he'd like. About whether the Thai place on 5th had gotten worse, or whether her standards had simply gotten higher. 6 days of her light visible under the door when he came home late. 6 days of almost. He was getting very tired of almost. Wednesday evening, 6:30. He was in the middle of writing up a service report when his phone lit up. Not Olivia. Marcus. She texted you something, Marcus said without greeting. I can tell by your face when we video called Sunday. What did she say? How do you know she texted me something? Because you've had your phone face up on the table every time we've talked for a week and a half. You're waiting for something. What did she say? Ethan set down his pen. She said she created a column. Silence on the line. Then, slowly. She said she created a column. In the spreadsheet. We talked about, it's a whole thing. She keeps spreadsheets. She said she made a new one, and when I asked what she named it, she said she was still working on that. Another silence. Longer this time. Marcus. I'm here. I'm just... A sound that was almost a laugh. This woman made you a spreadsheet column. She didn't make me one. She said she created one, for something she didn't have a category for. Ethan. Marcus's voice had dropped into its serious register, the one he reserved for things that actually mattered. That woman does not create columns for things she's not serious about. You understand that, right? Everything you've told me about her, the structure, the systems, the way she operates, a new column is not casual. That's her telling you something in the only language she fully trusts. He'd known that. He'd known it the moment he read the text. He just hadn't said it out loud yet, because saying it out loud made it a thing he had to act on. I don't know how to start that conversation, Ethan said. Yes, you do. I don't want to get it wrong. Then get it right. But get it. Because she opened a door, E. She opened it the only way she knows how, and if you stand in the hallway too long, it's going to close again. Not because she wants it to, because she'll convince herself she misread it. You know how people like her work. They'll build a case for their own retreat if you give them enough time. Ethan knew. He knew exactly how that worked because he'd watched her do it. The way she'd show up soft and then check herself, pull back slightly, reframe her own presence as an imposition when it never had been. She was fluent in the language of making herself smaller. He'd watched her do it and hated it quietly every single time. Tonight, Marcus said. Not a question. Yeah, Ethan said. Tonight. He finished the service report. He showered. He changed into something that wasn't work clothes, which was a decision that felt significant and possibly ridiculous, and he made it anyway. He stood in his kitchen at 8:15 and thought about what to say. He did not figure out what to say. He crossed the hallway and knocked anyway. She opened the door in a cardigan and reading glasses he'd never seen before, a paperback in one hand, the look of someone pulled out of a quiet evening. For exactly 1 second she looked surprised, Then, something in her face settled. "Hi," she said. "Hi." He put his hands in his pockets. "The column." She went very still. "The column. You named it yet?" She held the door with one hand and looked at him. Not away, not at the floor, directly at him. And he watched something happen in her eyes. A decision being made in real time. "Come in," she said. He came in. Her apartment was the inverse of his in layout, but not in feeling. It had the particular warmth of a space someone has tried hard to make efficient and accidentally made personal. Books on the shelves, organized by color, which he suspected was a compromise between the system she wanted and the one that actually looked like someone lived there. A throw blanket on the couch that had been used enough to lose its shape. A coffee mug on the side table with a ring underneath it that she hadn't gotten around to wiping. She didn't offer him a seat. She turned and faced him in the middle of the room and said, "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Know exactly what I need to hear and when." She wasn't angry. She was something else. Something that looked like someone who had been carrying a question for too long. "You knocked on my door. Not because I texted you. Not because I asked. You just knew." "I didn't know," he said honestly. "I was hoping." "Hoping what?" "That you hadn't talked yourself out of it yet." She exhaled. One breath, slow, like something releasing. "I was working on it," she admitted. "The talking myself out, I had a pretty solid argument going." "What was the argument?" "That you're too good at this." She gestured vaguely. "At being steady. At knowing when to wait and when to show up. And that I've mistaken that for something personal before. Someone being good at people and me thinking it meant they were good for me specifically." She looked at him. "I didn't want to do that again." He stepped closer. Not dramatically, just enough. "Has it felt the same?" "No," she said immediately. Then, like the honesty surprised her. "No, it hasn't." "Then don't make it the same. It's not that simple. It's not that complicated either." She looked at him with that expression he'd seen the first night, the one where she was running calculations and the numbers weren't coming out the way her logic expected. "Ethan." "Olivia." "I have a spreadsheet," she said. "An actual one. About this. About us. About whatever this is." She said it like she was confessing something mildly embarrassing. "I've been keeping it since... a while. I didn't mean to. It just started." He looked at her. "Okay. You're not going to make fun of me." "Why would I make fun of you?" "Most people would find it very strange that I track..." She stopped. "Can I show you?" "Yes," he said, immediately. She went to the kitchen counter where her laptop was open and turned it toward him. He came around to look. The spreadsheet was clean, minimal, the kind of document made by someone who found order genuinely comforting. Column A. Date. Column B. Reason for visit. Column C. Actual reason. He read column B first. Casserole. Orange juice return. Heating question. Borrowed umbrella. Returning book. Each entry had a date beside it and a perfectly reasonable stated purpose. Then he read column C. Casserole. Didn't want to eat alone. Orange juice. Wanted to see if it would be as easy as last time. Heating question. Could have called super. Didn't want to. Borrowed umbrella. It wasn't raining yet. Returning book. It was his book. I've had it for 4 days. He kept reading. The column C entries got shorter as the dates got more recent. 1 week ago. Wanted to. Last Thursday. Same. Last Friday. The night she'd paced about Ryan and the account. Needed him specifically. The last entry, dated Saturday morning, the morning she'd texted him about the column. Couldn't think of a reason. Didn't need one. That's the problem. He stood very still and read that last line twice. "The problem," he said quietly. "The problem," she confirmed from beside him. Her voice was careful. "Because I'm a person who needs reasons. I function on reasons. I don't do things without being able to explain them. And somewhere around week 2, I stopped being able to explain this and I just kept coming back anyway. And I didn't know what to do with that. He turned to look at her. She was close, closer than she'd been, because they'd both moved slightly without noticing, the way they did in his kitchen sometimes. What did you name the column? She reached past him and scrolled right. Column D, header cell. It said, Ethan. Just his name. His name as a category. His name as the thing that didn't fit anywhere else and so had to have its own space. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he looked at her. I've been watching you for 3 weeks, he said. Not in a way that's... I just mean I've been paying attention. To the way you work. To the way you let things matter to you and then try to pull it back because you're not sure you're allowed. To the way you are with Sophie, which is real, not performed. To the way you said, I like when things balance, and meant more than you said. He paused. I'm not your safe place, Olivia. I mean, I want to be that too. But that's not what this is. I don't want to be where you come when things break. I want to be where you come when they're fine, when there's no reason, when it's a Tuesday and nothing happened, and you just want to be somewhere. He held her gaze. I want to be that place. The room was very quiet. She looked at him the way she'd looked at him the very first night, standing in his hallway in the green dress, like she'd knocked on a door expecting one thing and found something she hadn't planned for. That's the most... She stopped. Her jaw worked once. Nobody has ever said that to me, in those words, that they want to be where I go when things are fine. I mean it. I know you do. That's what... She pressed her fingers briefly to her eyes, and he understood she wasn't going to cry. She was just feeling something run through her that she wasn't used to feeling in front of people. That's what makes it terrifying, Ethan. I know. I don't do terrifying. I know that too. He said it gently. But you named the column. She lowered her hand, looked at him. I named the column, she confirmed. That means something. It means I'm an accountant who has too many feelings and not enough categories for them. It means you already decided, he said. You decided before I knocked. You've been decided. You were just waiting to see if I was. She was very still. Are you? I've been decided since the hairpins, he said. The hairpins. You lined them up on my coffee table, first night. You were falling apart and you were still organizing something. I thought... I don't know what I thought, but something. He shook his head slightly. I've been somewhere since then. I just didn't know what to do about it. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, very quietly, I still don't know what to call this. We don't have to call it anything tonight. But we're calling it something. Yeah, he said, we're calling it something. She exhaled, and the last of the careful posture she'd been holding went with it, and she looked like herself. Not the version of herself that had a column for everything. Not the version that sat in parking garages and talked herself down. Just Olivia, tired and warm and real, standing in her own apartment looking at a man she had apparently been spreadsheet documenting her feelings about for 3 weeks, and had run out of reasons to pretend otherwise. Okay, she said. He reached out, slow, deliberate, not a surprise, and tucked a piece of her hair back from her face. She went completely still. Not in discomfort, in the specific stillness of someone receiving something they hadn't expected to be given. He left his hand there a moment against the side of her face. Her eyes closed once and then opened again. Hi, he said quietly. Hi, she said back. It was the same word they'd said at his door 3 weeks ago in the hallway. Same word, entirely different weight. He kissed her, not dramatically, not like a scene from something, like a decision, which is what it was. Careful and real and deliberate, the way everything about Ethan Carter was deliberate when it mattered. She went still for exactly 1 second, and then kissed him back the way someone kisses when they've been thinking about it without letting themselves think about it. Completely. quietly, with all the feeling that had been filing itself under not a column for weeks. When they stopped, she didn't move away. Neither did he. "I have to tell you something," she said, against the quiet. "Tell me." "I have a column D going back to the second week. I labeled it before I had a name for it. The header was—" She paused. He waited. "The header was the problem with the neighbor." He pulled back enough to look at her face. "The problem. I thought you were a problem I was going to solve and stop thinking about." "Did you solve it?" "Obviously not." She looked up at him. The glasses were slightly askew. He didn't say anything about it. "I renamed it 3 times. First it was the neighbor situation, then the hallway thing. Then I just typed your name because I ran out of ways to pretend it was abstract." He said, "I'm not abstract." "No," she agreed. "You're really not." He laughed, real, full, surprised out of him. And she laughed too, and the apartment held both of them easy and warm, and without any of the careful management that had come before. And this, Ethan thought, was what he'd been missing. Not just company. This. 2 people laughing in a room because the truth turned out to be lighter than the weight of not saying it. They sat on her couch. She made tea. He'd made it every time before, and the reversal felt significant, and she didn't comment on it, and neither did he, but they both noticed. She sat close, not performing anything, just there. "Sophie's going to be insufferable about this," he said. "Sophie's going to say she knew." "She did know. She told me she liked you in approximately the first 4 minutes. She told me too," Olivia said. "Last Saturday, when you were getting plates. She said, 'I already told my dad you can stay.' As if it was a done deal." He looked at her. "She said that." Very calmly, like she was confirming an appointment. "She didn't tell me that." "She probably assumed you'd catch up eventually." Olivia wrapped both hands around her mug. "She's 7. She's already better at this than either of us." "She really is." The evening moved the way the good ones do, not fast, not forced. They talked the way they'd been talking for weeks, but without the managed distance, without the invisible line that had been there since the beginning, the one neither of them drew intentionally, and both of them had been careful not to cross. It wasn't there anymore. Without it, the space between them was just space, warm and uncomplicated, and he understood that this was what had been missing all along. Not proximity, not time, but permission. The permission to let the thing be the thing. At 10:30, he said he should go. She didn't ask him to stay. He didn't offer. They were in the early pages of something, and neither of them wanted to rush the reading. At the door she said, "Ethan?" "Yeah." "For the record." She held his gaze. "I didn't knock on your door 3 weeks ago because you were closest." He'd thought about that. What Marcus had said, and what he'd feared, and what he'd started believing wasn't true long before tonight. "I know," he said. "I knocked on your door because even before that night She stopped, pressed her mouth together. "You always held the elevator. Everyone else lets it go. You always held it. And I thought, that's a person who sees people. And I wanted to be seen." She paused. "I just didn't know it would work that well." He looked at her. This woman who kept spreadsheets and lined up hairpins and sat in parking garages after bad evenings and knocked on doors instead of dissolving alone, who built systems to manage the distance between herself and everything that scared her, and who had nonetheless stood in a hallway at 11:40 p.m. in a party dress and told the truth. And he felt the whole weight of the last 3 weeks settle into something solid and certain. "I see you," he said. Plainly, without decoration. She nodded once, like she was receiving it into the record, like it was data, and the data was good, and she knew exactly which column it belonged in. He crossed the hallway. He did not look back this time, not because he didn't want to, but because he knew. He knew without looking that she was still there in the doorway. He knew because she was consistent, because 7:52 was 7:52, because a woman who named columns didn't close a door before she was ready. Inside his apartment, he leaned against the closed door for a moment and breathed. Sophie's voice memo from the week before played back in his head without him summoning it. "Do you think she'd want to be my friend?" And under that, quieter, the thing he hadn't let himself think fully until right now. He had been afraid for 3 years. Not of being alone. He'd gotten very competent at being alone. He'd been afraid of being wrong about someone again. Of building something that looked right from the outside and wasn't. Of failing his daughter by bringing the wrong thing into her life. Of trusting himself to know the difference. And then a woman had knocked on his door and lined up her hairpins on his coffee table, and he'd started paying attention. And what he'd found, underneath all the spreadsheets and the structured competence and the parking garage evenings, was someone who was afraid of exactly the same thing from the opposite direction. Two people who had been careful for so long they'd almost been careful right past each other. He pushed off the door and went to the kitchen and stood at the counter where the casserole dish had sat, where the orange juice had sat, where all the reasons and the not reasons had come and gone. His phone buzzed. Olivia. The column is renamed. He typed, "What's it called now?" The 3 dots. 10 seconds. Home. He stood in his kitchen at 10:47 on a Wednesday night and read that word and felt something in him that had been braced for a long time finally, quietly, let go. He typed back, "Yeah, just that. One word, because it was the truest thing, and the truest things don't require more." He set the phone down and looked at the refrigerator. Sophie's drawings, the sun with too many rays, the lopsided house, the figure in red crayon labeled Daddy. "Being alive is the scariest part," his daughter had said. He thought about that. He thought about the woman across the hallway who had knocked when she didn't have to, who had come back when she could have stopped, who had put his name in a spreadsheet column because she ran out of ways to lie to herself about what it meant. He thought about 3 years of quiet and one night that broke it open without asking permission. And he understood, with the clean certainty of someone who has stopped arguing with the evidence, that Olivia Hart had not knocked on his door to be rescued. She had knocked to be found, and he had been standing exactly on the other side. That was not an accident. That was not proximity. That was 2 people, in the same hallway, finally ready for the same thing at the same time. And that, more than the knock, more than the green dress, more than the hairpins and the casserole and the spreadsheet named after him, that was everything.